in this case customers, to the local stores. Instead of the big box store, go down Main Street, stop at the local shop. Very, very powerful. And I don't know, I suspect that many of us did that. We stopped at the local store and we didn't go down to Home Depot, we went down to the Ace Hardware.
I actually, this year, I went to craft shows to buy, I buy, you know, dozens and dozens of gifts, and I find locally made items because I know the money will go right in the pockets of local people. And why is it, you know, these craft shows, they hold them in churches and they hold them in auditoriums. Why don't some of these big shopping center complexes invite them in? What's the problem with trying to help local innovation, local development? We find so many restrictions that make it hard. One of the reasons we can't grow jobs fast enough is because certain interests in our society have such a lock on who can get in the door. There ought to be a section for local. We shouldn't have to pass a federal law for that. People who should be smart enough out there to do it. It creates more customers all ways around, and a lot of us want to support local.
I don't think we're talking about a law or a new regulation here, but we're talking about something that we ought to do for our communities, and that is recognize that we're all part of a community. You said something a few moments ago that caused me to come back to this issue. You talked about the trade deficit and the way in which we are literally exporting our money. We're also exporting our jobs. Last December, just a year ago, on this floor, we took up a piece of legislation that dealt with this issue. And in the previous tax code, there were tax breaks given to American corporations for shipping jobs offshore. For offshoring American jobs, they got a tax reduction. And some of us said, well, what in the world is that all about? So we scrambled and tried to figure out where the codes were, and a bill came forth on the floor that eliminated about two-thirds of those tax breaks given to American corporations when they offshore jobs. A very interesting division occurred here on the floor of this House. It was a straight-up bill. It wasn't complex. It was on that issue. Should American corporations continue to receive a tax break for offshoring jobs? That was the bill. No writers, no hidden agendas, no extraneous sentences put in. This House divided right down the middle. The Democrats voted to end the tax cuts. The Republicans, not one Republican voted to end those tax breaks given to American corporations for offshoring jobs. And I'm going, I don't get it, guys. You guys talk about jobs all the time. You talk about small businesses, and here you want to continue to subsidize the offshoring of American jobs? What's that all about? I mean, we never got an answer. But it speaks directly to the point that you were making earlier about policy choices. Our work is policy. Policy choices. Are we going to do this or are we going to do that? Are we going to continue to support American corporations for offshoring jobs, giving them our tax dollars? Are we going to continue to allow the oil companies to be subsidized? The wealthiest industry in the world takes about $15 billion a year of your tax money, and we give it to them. The oil, the gas, and the coal industries, about $15 billion a year in tax subsidies. Why do we do that? Why do we do that?
You raise a very good point, Congressman, and I went into one of these dollar stores, I won't say which name it was, with one of my good friends the other day. I couldn't find a non-Chinese made item on the shelf.
Wouldn't you love to go into Walmart and find made in America?
Oh, my goodness.
Wouldn't that be something?
And you know, you look at these, I'm a city planner by training, so I look at the space in these stores, and I thought, I could do this. I could clear one of these aisles, I could consolidate over there, and I could provide a place for locally made items. And let the local entrepreneurs compete, but give them a place on the shelf and don't make them pay these exorbitant fees. It doesn't take an act of Congress for some business innovation in these big box stores. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe America in some ways is losing her edge, because if the CEOs in charge of these retail stores can't be creative enough to figure out how to help us encourage innovation at the local level, What are they getting paid so much for? I think of all the local food products, all the handmade sweaters, all of the artwork, all of the pottery that's made locally, of the food product, it can't get to shelf because they keep them out. And, you know, come on, men and women out there in the retail world, show a little creativity here. We have a lot of innovation at the local level.
A little bit of patriotism.
Boy, it takes a little bit of patriotism.
Let me give you another example of what we can do with policy. Right now, we have a Buy American policy that really has not been enforced much. So I've introduced a piece of legislation, H.R. 613, that simply says that if it's our tax money, and we pay this every time we buy a gallon of gasoline or a gallon of diesel fuel, we pay either 18.5 cents for the gasoline or 26 cents for the diesel fuel in taxes. Where's the money going? Some of it, all too often, in fact, a lot of it all too often, winds up going offshore. I'll give you an example. The Oakland-San Francisco Bay Bridge, a multi-billion-dollar project. $1 billion worth of steel going into that bridge. It'll be a beautiful thing when it's completed. The bids for that came in for an American-made steel bridge or a Chinese-made steel bridge. It was 10% difference in cost. That's a lot of money. So the State of California Bridge Authority decided that they would take the 10% cheaper Chinese steel. The result is, after years, that the steel had problems, the welds had problems, the cost went well above 10%, and 3,000 jobs wound up in China, and 0 jobs wound up. So what this bill does, it simply says no more waivers, no more. If it's American-made, if it's American tax dollars that are being used, it's going to be used to buy American-made equipment, buses, trains, and the steel and concrete. It works. In the stimulus bill, which all our Republican friends want to dismiss, in the stimulus bill, there was one line for the several billion dollars of money that went into transit that said that money can only be used to buy American-made light rail, transit trains, and locomotives for Amtrak. Siemens opened a factory in Sacramento, California to build those light rail cars and the locomotives because the policy drafted here on this floor, passed by the Senate, and signed into law by President Obama said that tax money can only be used to buy American-made equipment. And it created hundreds of American jobs in Sacramento, California. This bill and another one like it that's now been introduced by the ranking member, Democrat in the Transportation Committee, will bring tens of thousands, indeed hundreds of thousands of jobs when our tax money is going to be used to buy American-made equipment.
You know, I wanted to mention, as you were talking, Congressman Garamendi, that as a result of the refinancing of the U.S. automotive industry in northern Ohio from Cleveland through Elyria, Lorain, Avon Lake, Sandusky, Toledo, Defiance, the whole corridor, what we're seeing is a reinvestment in the supplier chain. That includes steel, such as Republic Steel.
Supply chain in the auto industry?
Supply chain in the auto industry. People don't realize how many jobs in America are connected to the automotive industry. Your state of California, which manufactures a lot of semiconductors, half of the semiconductors procured in this country go into the automotive industry. If you think about carpeting, half of the carpeting sold in this country goes into automotive production. Plastics, glass, I mean, you think about what's really in there. And as a result of what we were able to do here, with a lot of flack from one side of the aisle, though there was some support, was to refinance the U.S. auto industry. We just had an announcement in Avon Lake that a truck platform will be coming back to us from Mexico. And so that is retention of jobs in Avon Lake. It is part of the rebirth of automotive and truck transportation across the north. We're producing vehicles like the Wrangler, one of the most popular vehicles in the country, obviously, and the new Cruze, for General Motors, but all the supplier change, Republic Steel, they're putting in a new arc furnace. You're looking at the restoration of production. It's coming slowly, but it's coming. And so we have to be proud of actions that were taken by the government of the United States through the action of Congress and by the President to help save one of America's lodestar industries that has now paid back its loans and is rehiring.
Let me just add to this. This was a result of the stimulus bill that put the money there, if need be, to rebuild the certain sectors of America. President Obama courageously and with enormous opposition from Republicans said, "I will not let the American automotive industry die. This is a fundamental industry in the United States. I will not let it die." And so he authorized the money that went to bail out General Motors and Chrysler. Ford didn't take advantage of it because they had a different financial situation. But the result of that is precisely what you've described, Ms. Capter. It's precisely the saving of the American automotive industry and all of the supply chain that goes with it. A very courageous action by the President, one that worked for the benefit of America so that we can once again make it in America. I know that I'm going to wrap this up very quickly because I know you have a couple of other things you want to talk about with regard to Wall Street, and I really want you to have the time to do that. And I think we've got about 15 minutes? 17. Good. That gives me 2 minutes to wrap up this
I would like to add one item, though.
Oh, well, we can go a little longer. Well, why don't you go ahead and take yours, and then I'll wrap at the end of it.
Very perfect. I just wanted to say a deep thanks to Congressman Garamendi for bringing us together tonight. And I wanted to say, as a member of the China Commission, we had testimony yesterday from various witnesses on the economy, on the legal structure of China, on democracy and the lack thereof in that country. And one of the points that we discussed was how closed the Chinese market is to products from around the world, much like Japan, much like Korea. You look at Singapore, many of the Asian nations keep our products out. And we're asking American companies to try to compete in a situation where our market is open and their market is closed. So we can't get access to those customers. And one of the points that was brought up by one of the top economists that testified before the China Commission was the fact that the Chinese government backs those companies. Really, the government owns the companies. And they infuse billions of dollars. So think about this. The workers and companies of Northern Ohio and the U.S. automotive industry is trying to compete in a global market where some of the major markets in the world, like Japan's, are closed, and they've remained closed for decades. China does not welcome us in. We are literally competing against state-managed capitalism. It is not a free market. It is not a market economy that we are dealing with. It's very controlled. And so when there was criticism by some that, oh gosh, look at Congress, you know, they're helping the U.S. automotive industry. It showed a lack of understanding of what these companies face in the global marketplace. It is not a level playing field. It is simply not. And unfortunately, we have never had a trade ambassador knowledgeable enough about the automotive industry, that came out again yesterday, who can really bargain successfully to give us a level playing field in one of the most important industries that we have.
Let me just give you another example. I thank you for raising that very, very important issue. Last year, this House, by an overwhelming bipartisan vote, set out to address the China situation. And it was a piece of legislation that simply said that when any government anywhere around the world unfairly subsidizes its business sector in a way that to the detriment of the American businesses, then that country will face sanctions. And specifically, it had to do with the Chinese currency. The Chinese currency is significantly undervalued, perhaps giving as much as a 20% advantage to China in its exports. Bipartisan, it passed here. It did not pass in the Senate. However, this year, my Republican colleagues will not even allow that to come up for a vote here, even though it has now passed in the Senate. So the Chinese currency bill passed the Senate. It's languishing in this House. I do not understand why our Republican colleagues want to continue to allow China to have an unfair advantage. And another thing, and I think I was going to wrap up with this, I'll do it in about 10 seconds. China subsidizes to a fairly well its solar and wind industry, so much so that they have literally taken over the market and have led to the bankruptcy of a couple of American solar manufacturers, Solyndra being one example that's much discussed around here, but it was really as a result of China's driving down the price of solar panels. This bill, again, one that I've introduced, and it comes directly from my district because we have a major wind farm and solar systems there, says that our tax money that presently goes to subsidize the purchase of solar systems and wind turbines must only be used to buy American-made wind turbines and solar panels. In other words, buy American, make it in America, rebuild our industry. I'm going to just wrap very quickly and turn over the microphone to Ms. Capter so she can carry on a couple of other issues that she wants to discuss. It's the holiday season. It's that time when we think about our families. It's that time when we think about our community. And we have a real obligation here in the House of Representatives to put forth really solid legislation to support those men and women and families in America that through no fault of their own are unemployed or having a very difficult time of making it in the current economy as wages are driven down, as opportunities for advancement are diminished. What we hope for and literally pray for is a consensus, a compromise in the next couple of days here on the floor of this House and with the Senate so that we can pass legislation that would actually help the American workers, those that are unemployed and those that are seeking a job or have a job and unable to make it with that payroll tax deduction, putting another $1,000 in their pocket. And I want us to keep in mind that in America today there are 1.4 million children, 1.4 million children that are homeless. Their parents have lost their job. They've lost their home. They're sleeping in cars. They're homeless. They may be able to find an opportunity at a motel. We've seen some of this on television. But this is in all of our communities. Every community in America has this problem. And it's up to us here in Congress to use what compassion and wisdom we possess to find ways of addressing it. We have such an opportunity with the payroll tax deduction, with the welfare, and unfortunately the bill that passed here yesterday basically would put money into the right pocket through a payroll tax deduction or an unemployment check and then take it out of the left pocket with an increase in fees, a reduction in medical services, the closing of clinics, or other ways in which that money would be extracted. Yes, it would balance. It wouldn't increase the deficit except for the working men and women of America. We think that's wrong, and we've offered a different solution. I'd like now, I noticed that my colleague from New York has come. A couple of short comments. I promised Ms. Capter the last few moments of this. So welcome, Mr. Tonko. The East-West show is back in session.
Oh, there you go. Representative Garamendi, thank you again for leading us in what is a very important bit of discussion about job creation, job retention in our country. And I couldn't agree more with your sentiments that include this concern about providing a benefit to the middle class in terms of a payroll tax holiday extender, but then also asking them to pay for that benefit. So it is like one hand is offering and the other hand is taking from our working families, middle-class Americans. This is not the prescription for success. What has been offered by the President is a payroll holiday extender, tax holiday extender, for both employers and employees. And there are many small businesses that stand to gain. The overwhelming majority of small businesses gain by that extension, and certainly the employees do. But it works best when you bring leverage into the equation that comes from the surcharge that is placed upon the most high income strata in our country. And when you look at the charts from 1979 to the present day, there's no denying what statistics indicate. Facts can't be argued with. There has been this exponential rise in the growth of income for the top 1% to about 250% of an increase. All while from 1979, middle-income Americans have seen a flatlining of their household income, and now it's even dipping. So why mess with this progress that has been realized? The steady climb upward, slow but steady, from an 8.2 million jobs lost hole, we have climbed steadily. Why would you mess with that obvious success that is coming back into the economy, allow for America's middle-class families to move forward, and allow for that benefit to be paid for by someone other than the middle class? Otherwise, it's giving and taking from the same audience. It makes no sense. We stand by progress. We stand by progressive policy. We stand by our middle class, our working families. Let's get it done for middle-class America. Without a strong middle class, there is not a strong America.
I thank you very much, Mr. Tonko, for bringing that up. I'm going to ask Ms. Capter of Ohio to take the podium here and to tell us about Wall Street and some of the reforms that she's advocating. Please.
I thank the gentleman for yielding me this time and rise this evening on the subject of MF Global and a clear need for greater oversight by this Congress. Mr. Speaker, Congress isn't doing its job to investigate the fraud that has infected our entire financial system, fraud perpetrated by Wall Street, and it has hurt the global financial system as well. I think the reason is that too many people have forgotten that gambling with other people's money often entices very addictive personalities who are incapable of self-policing. They need rules, they need limits, and they need oversight. Otherwise, they just keep getting into the same trouble again and again, harming innocent people in the process by looting their assets. The American people know that corruption on Wall Street is pervasive, and millions upon millions of our fellow citizens have been harmed by it. The Republican leadership in this House have failed in their responsibility to aggressively investigate crime in the financial services sector. Earlier this month, I spoke about Bloomberg's report on how President Bush's Secretary of the Treasury, Hank Paulson, in 2000, inappropriately and behind closed doors in a private meeting, tipped off his former colleagues at Goldman Sachs and a handful of Wall Street insiders about how Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac might collapse and what steps the government intended to take. All of this occurred on the very same day that Secretary Paulson led the New York Times to believe that those two companies would give a signal of confidence to the markets. You can imagine what those financial insiders did with their investments before the rest of America was even aware. I also reminded my colleagues that the Securities and Exchange Commission was finally rebutted recently in a New York court for settling fraud cases with major Wall Street banks like Citigroup in a way that allowed the biggest banks to walk away by simply paying a few fines without so much as admitting any wrongdoing. I ask, where is this Congress's oversight of these most crucial financial machinations that have so harmed our nation and world since the market crashed in 2008? Finally, after months and months of press coverage, Congress is taking a tad of action. Last week, the House Agriculture Committee held one of the first hearings we have seen all year. That hearing, called by Chairman Frank Lucas of Oklahoma and Ranking Member Colin Peterson of Minnesota, began to shed some light on what is the 8th largest bankruptcy in U.S. history at MF Global Holdings. Its misdeeds have been widely reported, but they deserve much closer scrutiny, and we need to subpoena their full records and transactions that led to the collapse. Even before last week's hearings, we knew that MF Global Holdings filed for Chapter 11 on October 30th. Citizens in my district have been impacted and harmed as over $1 billion disappeared from customer accounts. The Washington Post and other press reported weeks ago that the firm's CEO, former Governor John Corzine, had essentially placed a $6.3 billion bet on the sovereign debt of several European governments. After its most recent quarterly return showed almost $200 million in losses, MF Global stock lost 67% of its value. But this is not just a case of an investment firm being lured by the higher returns of riskier bonds. As investigators continue to piece together what happened at MF Global, there is increasing evidence of criminal activity. This case has all the trappings of a massive case of fraud. Now, CME Group Incorporated, that audited MF Global's accounts, reported weeks ago that Mr. Corzine's company violated key federal requirements to keep its accounts separate from their customer accounts. At last week's Agricultural Committee hearing, the public was once again told that as much as $1.2 billion may still be missing from segregated customer accounts. This isn't just a case of misplaced money. The financial press has been reporting a staggering amount of malfeasance in the days before MF Global filed for bankruptcy. In an apparent effort to buy themselves time, MF Global sent checks instead of wiring money. Many of those checks, we all know now, bounced. There are stories of requests to transfer funds being denied and even inaccurate account statements being issued. Even more egregious are accounts of people receiving bounced checks, going back and finding their accounts were also altered inappropriately. May I ask, if this doesn't sound like fraud, what is it? The American people must demand more congressional oversight. Congress needs to produce more information. I attended last week's hearing in the House Agriculture Committee. While some important questions were asked of Mr. Corzine, Congress's responsibility has been far from met. Anyone who carefully followed the hearing watched as Mr. Corzine dodged questions and provided hollow responses. The Wall Street Journal provided us with an interesting assessment of Mr. Corzine's testimony that is worth entering in the record. According to the Journal, Governor Corzine ducked or deflected questions 15 times. On 5 occasions, he used a well-known strategy for avoiding accountability by using some variant of the phrase, "I did not intend to break any rules." He apologized or expressed regret 6 times for the damage his choices wrought on countless families and businesses. But the operative fact is $1.2 billion. That is the amount that is missing from MF Global's segregated client funds, for which Mr. Corzine could provide no explanation. In fact, astoundingly, this seasoned trader pleaded ignorance of what was happening at his own company. Let me mention that the Commodity Futures Trading Corporation Commission, Jill Summers, representative, who testified at the hearing, was very invaluable to public understanding. Mr. Speaker, I believe that I have a special order and time remaining, my own special order for 30 minutes.
The chair will need to confirm that.
Okay.
My apologies.
The prior one had an hour and then I had 30 minutes. See, it's really bad.
There being no Republican to take the half hour at this time, under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 30 minutes.
I thank the Speaker. Let me rephrase this. At the hearing, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, Jill Summers' testimony was invaluable to the public. Her testimony places the MF Global collapse in proper perspective, and I'm quoting directly. She said, "Lehman Brothers and Refco are the 2 most recent Futures Commission merchant bankruptcies. While the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy was monumental in scale, and the Refco bankruptcy involved serious fraud at the parent company, commodity customers did not lose their money at either firm. In both instances, commodity customer accounts were wholly intact. That is, they contained all open positions and all associated segregated collateral. That being the case, customer accounts were promptly transferred to healthy FCMs, or Futures Commission merchants, with the commodity customers having no further involvement in the bankruptcy proceeding. Unfortunately, that is not what happened at MF Global because customer accounts were not intact. The fact that customer accounts were not intact, as Commissioner Summers described it, means that someone took other people's money. I believe most of us would call that theft. Even if some of the money is recovered by the bankruptcy process, that does not alter the fact that the process by which customer accounts were violated broke the law. It is an understatement to say that many American families and businesses lost important investments. The mismanagement of this one firm has put hundreds of people's investments in jeopardy. They deserve answers. Congress has lead responsibility to ask hard questions, and here are some questions that demand reply. On transfers of funds from customer accounts, Congress must ask examiners from Chicago's Mercantile Exchange Group who said that transfers at MF Global were made, and I quote, in a manner that may have been designed to avoid detection. So let us ask, should the person or persons who attempted to avoid this detection be held accountable? And how should that occur? It seems unlikely Mr. Corzine is not responsible. So which person or persons at MF Global made the decision to invade customer accounts? Congress must assure full tracing of those transactions. A second group of questions should revolve around who are the responsible parties. If Mr. Corzine simply cannot recall or does not know what happened at MF Global, as he seemed to claim, who should Congress and investigators speak with at MF Global to ascertain his exact role and those of other top executives? Who's going to probe? That's the role of a Congressional Investigatory Committee. Who besides Mr. Corzine was directly responsible for segregating customer account funds from MF Global funds? Over $1 billion did not walk off on its own. Some set of persons at MF Global moved those funds, and it's highly implausible that no one authorized that action. So what set of persons authorized those actions exactly? Another set of questions should revolve around who approved MF Global's risk standards. We know that Michael Roseman, MF Global's former chief risk officer who resigned in March 2011, reportedly assessed that the strategy that MF Global was undertaking was too risky. Any assertion that the strategy was prudent at the time, as Mr. Corzine is arguing, is against the facts of history because MF Global went bankrupt. Congress needs to take whatever steps are necessary to find out exactly who pressured Mr. Roseman to resign for blowing the whistle on the behavior inside that company. Another set of questions can be asked about what other financial partners participated in MF Global's trades. There are allegations that the transfer of $200 million to J.P. Morgan in the final days of MF Global was suspected by J.P. Morgan bankers of utilizing MF client funds. To what extent are these allegations true? At what point can we determine whether wire fraud was committed? And if so, by whom and to what extent? All of this begs the ultimate question of whether or not sufficient protections were exercised for customers to stop wire fraud. Another set of questions can revolve around were any inside players aiding and abetting MF Global's behavior. We know that current Commodity Futures Trading Commission Chairman Mr. Gensler, has recused himself from the case. Mr. Gensler actually worked for Mr. Corzine at Goldman Sachs, and they apparently carried on later in the same social and academic circles. The public has a right to know at what point Mr. Gensler had any knowledge or reason to believe that the customer accounts at MF Global might not have been intact. And then, how did he and his agency and his staff respond? Day by day, hour by hour, email by email. Finally, according to Reuters, companies like Cook Industries removed billions from MF Global just before it filed bankruptcy. How did that powerful company know when to take their money out? And why did my constituents not know when to take their money out? Could, in fact, Cook Industries have gotten the same tip-off that Goldman CEO Hank Paulson had given Freddie Mac investors and Fannie Mae investors just a few years before? How much of MF Global's money was not wired rightfully belongs to the holders of segregated accounts that were inappropriately tapped by MF Global? How do my constituents get full restitution? Yes, there are far too many questions, lots of questions, and far too few complete answers. Yes, this Congress needs to take white-collar crime more seriously. Who would accept an explanation, as we heard the other day, that I did not intend to steal? It could be $100 from the corner gas station, right? How can that be an acceptable answer for taking hundreds of millions and over $1 billion? Rigorous investigation matters. Congress needs more robust hearings. We need more thorough investigations. What should concern all of us is that the financial industry's fraud and imprudence, yes, addictive behavior, is not limited to a case here or there. In the financial services sector, fraud has become systemic. It is endemic. It has harmed our nation's economy to its vitals and has hurt millions of people across our country and the financial systems of other countries. In 2009, the FBI testified before the House Judiciary Committee that the current financial crisis, and I'm quoting directly, has produced one unexpected consequence. It has exposed prevalent fraud schemes that have been thriving in the global financial system. These fraud schemes are not new, but they are hitting the economy hard, and the public is hurting as a result of market deterioration. What a true statement. Regretfully, this isn't the first time that our country has seen a crime wave in the financial services industry. Indeed, the crimes and addictive behavior seem to be getting bigger, not smaller. In the 1980s, it was the savings and loan crisis. Then the FBI responded with a staff of 1,000 agents and forensic experts based in 27 cities. You know how many they had over there when this started? 45. You could count them on your own hands. Perpetrators went to jail back then, but rather than this Congress the Congresses at that time ignored the warnings of what had happened, and they gave an even bigger green light during the 1990s to more abuse by removing the rules of the road for banking during the 1990s. Example, the upending of the Glass-Steagall Act in the late 1990s that blew the lid off prudent banking and allowed bankers and speculators to be in the same company, and look what has happened. We need to restore the Glass-Steagall Act, and I have a bill to do that. And there are dozens and dozens of co-sponsors on that bill. In 2000, the surreptitious undermining of the derivative regulation by this Congress led to Wall Street's bullish plunder that we are now experiencing, again, the result of addictive behavior of the 2000s. You know, when you go back to the savings and loan crisis, that was much smaller than what we are enduring today. That is why I have a straightforward bill, H.R. 1350, the Financial Crisis Criminal Investigation Act. It authorizes an additional 1,000 agents and forensic experts for the white-collar crime division of the FBI to investigate and prosecute these financial crimes. I encourage all of my colleagues to join me as a co-sponsor. The Bureau does not have anywhere near the resources it needs to take on crimes of this magnitude and dimension. Congress has long debated what level of regulation is needed to restrain financial addicts. There should be no debate about the need to uphold the law, to recover innocent people's money, to prosecute the addicted gamblers, to set a strict standard of behavior in the financial sector so it simply never happens again, so that we can restore confidence and regular order, not insider abuse, to America's financial markets. I think this Congress has an awesome responsibility to do its job, and it should not fear anyone. The committees of this House should be working overtime to probe the truth, to find the truth, to get at the truth of those who have harmed America, that have put so many millions of people out of work, where so many homes have been foreclosed that the property values of this country can't even find their footing at this point. It's affecting capital formation. It's affecting the ability of local banks to make loans because they're not sure of what's going to happen to valuation on their books. What could be more serious than the committees of this Congress doing their job? I want to commend Congressman Lucas of Oklahoma. I want to commend Congressman Peterson of Minnesota. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they could continue their important work, but that the other committees of this Congress that have responsibility for oversight, government oversight and reform, the Judiciary Committee, the Financial Services Committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, were actually to do the work that needs to be done to put this country's banking and financial system back in a decent position with prudent rules, and to finally quash the addictive behavior that has brought our country to this very dangerous point. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the time this evening. I thank my colleagues and those who are listening, and I yield back my remaining time.
Gentlewoman yields back pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1. The House stands in recess subject to the call of the Chair.
So the House has gavelled out, but earlier today, members approved